Torchlight flickers across its interior, 1,000 rusted spikes gleaming like the teeth of some ancient demon. The air hangs thick with the copper tang of old blood and the acrid smoke of burning oil. A woman's scream pierces the darkness, then stops abruptly, replaced by ragged breathing and the shuffle of chains against stone. It is the year 1481, and the Spanish Inquisition has just claimed its first victim. In the corner, a Dominican friar in black and white robes dips his quill into ink, his hand steady, despite the sounds of suffering. He records her confession with mechanical precision, each word extracted through agony, each admission of heresy wrung from flesh and bone. The scratch of his pen mingles with the distant drip of water somewhere in the labyrinth of torture chambers that honeycomb beneath the city's holy places. But this is not merely the story of pain inflicted in God's name. This is the chronicle of an institution that transformed the female body into a battleground, where instruments of torment bore names as beautiful as they were terrible. The potro, the toca, the garucha, each device a dark sacrament in the Church's war against sin. What drove the most powerful religious institution in Christendom to create such elaborate engines of suffering? And why were women so often their victims? The Cathedral of Seville rises against the Andalusian sky like a mountain of faith rendered in stone and gold. Within its shadowed nave, Queen Isabella of Castile kneels in prayer, her crimson velvet gown pooling around her like spilled wine. The scent of frankincense drifts through shafts of colored light that pierce the gloom from stained glass windows high above. Her lips move silently, forming words of devotion that have become her armor against a kingdom fractured by doubt. The year is 1478, and Spain trembles on the precipice of transformation. Behind the Queen stands Tomás de Torquemada, soon to become the Grand Inquisitor. His gaunt frame casts a skeletal shadow across the cathedral floor. He watches Isabella with eyes that burn with the fever of absolute certainty, the kind of conviction that can reshape nations or destroy them. In his mind, Spain is a garden overrun with weeds. Conversos, Jews who converted to Christianity, Muslims who whisper prayers in Arabic behind closed doors, women who practice the old healing arts learned. 4. Issues the papal bull, Exigit sinceras devotionis affectus. The words flow in elegant Latin across vellum, so fine it seems translucent in candlelight. With these words, the Pope grants Ferdinand and Isabella the authority to appoint inquisitors throughout their territories. The hunt for heretics is no longer merely spiritual. It becomes an instrument of state power, woven into the very fabric of Spanish governance. The apparatus of the Inquisition grows swiftly, like a dark vine spreading through the kingdom. In every major city, Seville, Toledo, Córdoba, Barcelona, tribunals establish themselves within fortified palaces and monastery complexes. The architecture itself speaks of permanence. Thick walls of limestone block out the world. Narrow windows admit only slivers of light. And, beneath it all, the chambers. Always the chambers, cut deep into bedrock, where screams cannot escape to trouble the faithful above. The inquisitors are learned men, trained in theology and canon law at Salamanca and other great universities. They wear their education like vestments, citing Augustine and Aquinas as they condemn the accused. But beneath their scholarly robes, they are also men of appetites, for power, for certainty, for the intoxicating righteousness that comes from believing oneself God's instrument. Women move through this world with particular caution. A widow who inherits her husband's property too eagerly. A midwife whose herbal remedies prove too effective. A merchant's wife who lights candles on Friday evening. Any deviation from the prescribed order invites scrutiny, and scrutiny, once invited, rarely departs unsatisfied. In the markets of Seville, women lower their voices when discussing their neighbors. They watch each other with suspicious eyes, wondering who might whisper accusations to the familiares, the network of lay informants who serve as the Inquisition's ears throughout the kingdom. Trust becomes a luxury none can afford. Yet life continues with its rhythms. Bread is baked, children are born, The fountains in the Alcazar gardens still splash with crystalline water. Beneath the surface of normalcy, however, something has shifted. The air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting. In a chamber of the Inquisition's headquarters, a new shipment arrives of truth, no different from a surgeon's lancet that cuts away diseased flesh to save the body. But somewhere in the shadows of that room, perhaps, even he feels the first tremor of what is to come. The knock comes at midnight, always at midnight, when darkness makes accomplices of shadows, and the city sleeps too deeply to witness. Catalina Alvarez startles awake in her bed, her hand instinctively reaching for her daughter sleeping beside her. The sound echoes again, more insistent now, accompanied by voices that carry the flat authority of men who need not ask permission. "Open in the name of the Holy Office." Her hands tremble as she lights a candle. The flame gutters in the draft that seeps through the shutters of her modest house in Toledo's Jewish quarter. Though it is no longer called that, not officially, not since the conversions. Her husband had been a silversmith, his hands skilled at coaxing beauty from raw metal, until Thiva took him 2 winters past. Now she sells the work he left behind, piece by precious piece, to feed their daughter. The door shudders under heavy fists. She has no choice. She never had a choice. 6 men enter. 4 familiares in dark cloaks, and 2 Dominican friars whose white robes seem to glow in the candlelight like shrouds. Their leader, Fray Diego Rodriguez, holds a scroll sealed with red wax. He does not look at her as he breaks the seal, and reads in a voice devoid of inflection. Accusations of Judaizing, of secretly observing the Sabbath, of refusing to eat pork at her neighbor's feast 3 months prior. "These are lies," she whispers, but the words die in her throat even as she speaks them. Truth and lies have ceased to matter. Someone has accused her, perhaps the widow next door who coveted her late husband's remaining silverwork, perhaps the merchant who proposed marriage and was refused. The source is irrelevant. The machinery has been set in motion. They take her that night, leaving her daughter screaming in the arms of a neighbor who will not meet Catalina's eyes. The journey through Toledo's streets passes in a blur of cobblestones and starlight. The palace of the Inquisition looms before her, its facade beautiful in the way a tomb can be beautiful. All clean lines and perfect proportions, concealing what festers. One end fitted with a ratchet mechanism. Leather straps dangle from its surface like the tentacles of some patient predator. 3 men wait beside it. The Inquisitor, who will ask the questions. The Notary, who will record her responses with bureaucratic precision. And the Executioner, whose face she cannot see behind a leather hood. This anonymity is a mercy, she realizes, not for her, but for him, so he might walk the streets afterward without shame. "You need only confess the truth," the Inquisitor says, settling into a high-backed chair. He is younger than she expected, with soft hands that have never known labor. "Tell us how you have betrayed the faith. Name those who betrayed it with you, and mercy shall be shown." But Catalina has heard the stories. Mercy, in the Inquisition's vocabulary, is a word that has lost its meaning. Those who confess quickly are strangled before burning. Those who confess under torture face the flames alive, but are reconciled to the church. Those who maintain innocence are relaxed to the secular arm and burned as unrepentant heretics. There is no path that leads to freedom, only varying routes to the pyre. "I am a faithful Christian," she says, and her voice surprises her with its steadiness. "I attend Mass. I take communion. I have done nothing." The executioner's hand falls upon her shoulder, and she understands that speaking is finished. They strip her, methodically, without urgency or shame, until she stands naked in the chill air. The humiliation is its own torture, carefully calculated. A woman's modesty is another weapon they wield against her. They bind her to the potro, leather straps cutting into her wrists and ankles. The wood is cold against her bare back. Above her, a single oil lamp swings gently from a chain, making the shadows dance across the ceiling like demons at play. Once more, the Inquisitor says, dipping his quill. Confess your heresy. She closes her eyes, prays, not to God, what God would permit this, but to her daughter, that the child might forget her mother's face, might make a life in a world that has become a waking nightmare. The executioner begins to turn the roller. The ratchet clicks. Once, twice, 3 times. Her body elongates. She does not believe. Naming names of people she barely knows, they nod, as though she has confirmed what they already suspected. The notary records it all. Her confession will be read at the autodafé, that great spectacle of faith where the condemned process through streets lined with jeering crowds. She will wear the San Benito, the penitential garment painted with flames, and she will burn. But that is not the betrayal that shatters her. The betrayal comes 3 days later, when they bring her daughter to the same chamber and ask Catalina to watch as they prepare the girl for questioning. 8 years old, and already suspect because her mother was suspect. Confess that you taught her Jewish rites, the Inquisitor says, and the child will be spared. In that moment, Catalina understands the true genius of the Inquisition's cruelty. They have found the one pain greater than any device can inflict, the agony of choosing between truth and love, between salvation and damnation, between her soul and her daughter's life. Her mouth opens, words form, and the betrayal is complete. The Plaza Mayor of Seville blazes with light on this May morning in 1484. Though the sun has barely crested the cathedral's spire, thousands have gathered. Nobility in their viewing platforms draped with silk, merchants and craftsmen pressed shoulder to shoulder in the square, even beggars who have crawled from their hovels to witness what they call God's justice. The air thrums with anticipation, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, roasting meat from vendors' stalls, and underneath it all, the acrid promise of smoke. The autodafé, the act of faith, has become Spain's theater of the damned. Catalina shuffles forward in the procession of the condemned, her bare feet bleeding on the cobblestones. The San Benito hangs upon her frame like a burial shroud, its yellow fabric painted with demons, dragging souls into hellfire. Upon her head sits the carroza, a pointed hat that marks her as a heretic, making her a spectacle of shame. Around her neck, a placard proclaims her crimes in letters large enough to be read from the farthest edges of the crowd. Judaizer, heretic, reconciled to the church through holy torture. Her daughter walks separately, among those spared the flames. Through their mouth kept 2 sets of dishes, one for meat, one for milk, proof of Jewish practice. A midwife who spoke incantations during difficult births, evidence of witchcraft. A merchant's widow who refused to remarry, suspicious independence that must conceal darker sins. The patterns become clear to those who watch with seeing eyes. Of the 73 condemned today, 51 are women. They are the widows who inherited property, the healers whose knowledge threatened physicians' authority, the conversos whose conversions were deemed insufficiently sincere. They are the ones who could be taken without sparking revolt, whose testimony could be extracted without political consequence, whose bodies could be broken without upsetting the kingdom's delicate balance of power. The Inquisition has discovered what witch hunters across Europe already knew. Women make the most convenient heretics. One by one, they are led to the quemadero, the burning place, where stakes have been driven into a raised platform. The crowd surges forward, faces flushed with righteous fervor. Children are lifted onto shoulders for a better view. Merchants place wagers on who will scream loudest, who will take longest to die. Catalina is bound to her stake with practiced efficiency. The executioner who tortured her now performs this final service, his movements gentle, despite the horror of his task. Perhaps he feels some measure of pity. Perhaps he is simply tired. This is the 3rd autodafé this month, and his arms ache from the repetition. Brushwood is piled around her feet, not enough to grant the mercy of a quick death, but sufficient to create spectacle. The smoke will suffocate her long before the flames consume her flesh, if God is merciful. But God has been absent from these proceedings since they began. A priest approaches with a crucifix, holding it before her face. "Embrace Christ in your final moments," he urges. "Die in the faith and be saved." She turns her head away. This small rebellion is all she has left. The power to refuse their salvation, to die unreconciled and damned by their measure, rather than accept the mercy of those who destroyed her. Let them say she died impenitent. Let them paint her soul into hell on church walls as a warning to others. She will not give them her final breath. The torch is lit. Multiple hands reach forward, eager to participate in this holy work. The flames catch quickly, spreading through the dry wood. Fire roars. The crowd roars with it, and Catalina Alvarez becomes one more name in the Inquisition's ledgers. One more soul sacrificed to the dream of a unified, purified Spain. But she is not the last. In the months and years that follow, the pyres multiply. The Inquisition spreads beyond Castile and Aragon, establishing tribunals in Sicily, Sardinia, the Americas. The instruments of torture are refined, made more efficient. The burro, the Spanish donkey, a sharp wooden wedge upon which victims are seated with weights attached to their feet, splitting them slowly in two. The brodequin, iron boots into which wedges are hammered, crushing bones to splinters. The spider, an iron claw heated red hot, designed specifically to tear at women's breasts. Each device bears a name, often beautiful, often domestic. The Inquisition understands the power of language, how pretty words can make horror palatable. Records kept in the archive of the Inquisition in Simancas tell the story in numbers. Between 1480 and 1530, over 2,000 people burned alive. Tens of thousands more tortured, their property confiscated, their families destroyed. Women comprised the majority, their bodies bearing the scars of an institution's determination to control not just faith, but flesh itself. The chambers beneath Seville's palace continue their work. New prisoners descend the worn stone steps daily. The executioners perfect their craft, learning precisely how long a body can endure the rack before permanent damage occurs. Exactly how much water can be forced down a throat before drowning becomes inevitable. The notaries fill volumes with confessions, creating an archive of agony that will survive long after the Inquisition itself dissolves. By 1530, the fever has begun to break. The conversos have been sufficiently terrorized, the Jews expelled entirely, the Muslims conquered and converted. Spain stands unified under one faith, one crown, one terror. The Inquisition remains. It will persist for 3 more centuries, but its most savage phase has passed. The cost cannot be calculated in numbers alone. Entire communities have been destroyed, knowledge lost, trust shattered. Spain has purchased its purity with blood, and the stain will not. Inquisition. Thousands upon thousands of pages, each one a testament to methodical cruelty. The confessions extracted on the rack. The inventories of torture devices, catalogued with the precision of accountants. The letters between inquisitors discussing techniques, comparing results, debating theological fine points, while bodies broke in chambers below. Historians move through these archives with gloved hands, turning pages that still carry the weight of screams. They search for answers to questions that grow more urgent with each passing century. Why? Why such elaborate cruelty? Why such particular focus on women's bodies and women's pain? The official records speak of faith, of purification, of defending Christianity against the contamination of Jewish and Muslim influence. Torquemada himself wrote extensively of his divine mandate, his letters filled with scriptural citations and theological justification. To read his words is to encounter a mind utterly convinced of its righteousness, incapable of doubting that God sanctioned every turn of the screw, every application of flame. But beneath the piety, other motivations whisper. The Inquisition's records also contain meticulous accounting of properties seized, estates confiscated, wealth redistributed from the condemned to their accusers and to the Holy Office itself. A woman burned meant a house available, land transferred, silver and gold flowing into royal coffers. The Spanish crown perpetually at war, perpetually in debt, found in heresy a convenient source of revenue. And there is something else, something darker still. In the pattern of accusations, in the choice of victims, in the specific nature of the tortures applied, particularly to women, lie a hatred that transcends economics and politics. The midwife with her dangerous knowledge of women's bodies, the widow with her unseemly independence, the converso woman who threatens social hierarchies simply by existing in the space between two faiths. They represented challenges to an order that demanded complete submission, challenges that had to be destroyed with theatrical brutality to serve as warnings to others. Was the Spanish Inquisition a sincere attempt to protect religious purity? Was it an instrument of state power, wielded to consolidate a fractured kingdom? Was it an expression of misogyny, given theological justification across centuries, in the wariness with which women approach authority, in the understanding that institutions claiming divine sanction can perpetrate horrors, in the knowledge that torture, once normalized, becomes bureaucratic, something recorded in neat handwriting, filed in proper order, defended as necessary. Catalina Alvarez is not the woman's real name. That detail is lost. One entry among thousands in registers that reduce lives to charges and confessions. But she was real. They all were real. The women who screamed in the chambers, the daughters who learned to forget, the generations who carried trauma embedded so deeply it altered the very shape of Spanish culture. Perhaps that is the question we should ask. Not why the Inquisition tortured women with such systematic creativity, but why we still struggle to comprehend how ordinary men, educated, pious, believing themselves righteous, could inflict such suffering and sleep soundly afterward. The archive keeps its silence. The torture devices rest in museums now, displayed behind glass with neat placards explaining their function. Tourists photograph them, shudder appropriately, and move on to admire Spanish paintings in the next gallery. But somewhere in the vaults of Simancas, a page turns in a draft, and the ghost of Catalina Alvarez turns her face from the crucifix one more time, choosing defiance over redemption, choosing to die unforgiven rather than absolve her torturers. What price purity? What cost certainty? The Inquisition believed it knew. History offers no such comfort.